You're listening to The Dealmaker's Edge with A.Y. Strauss, diving deep into stories behind commercial real estate leaders. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dealmaker's Edge. Today, we are really excited to be joined by Avner Krohn, who's the founder, chairman, and CEO of Jasko Development. Based in New Britain, Connecticut, Jasko Development is a real estate firm focused on multifamily, retail, and healthcare projects. They work closely with communities to deliver housing and commercial spaces that align with local needs. With a vertically integrated approach and an emphasis on technology, Jasko manages development, construction, and asset management to create lasting, functional spaces. Avner has led the successful delivery of dozens of commercial real estate projects across the Northeast, spanning retail, healthcare, mixed use, and multifamily. And with a strong focus on community-first development, he works closely with cities and stakeholders to ensure every project is a win-win. Avner is a good friend of mine. I've spent a lot of time with him over the years. He has a high integrity, wonderful personality, super positive energy. And in this conversation, he's going to talk about successful dynamics to public-private partnerships, which you don't hear people speak about too much, riding the highs and lows of development in the current markets we're facing, and also just kind of how to navigate and juggle so many projects in real time with varying degrees of responsibility. Hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dealmaker's Edge. Today, we are pumped to be joined by Avner Krohn, and he is a dear friend of mine, somebody I really respect tremendously. He brings an incredible energy to the table, and we're going to get his story, and we're going to learn from him today. So, Avner, really excited to hear it. Thanks for being here today.
Hey, Aaron, my pleasure. When I got the invite, I was super excited. You and I got a great story on how we met. We could touch on that a little bit later, but very excited for the conversations today and really happy to be here on this rainy Monday.
Yes, cold, rainy Monday, but good energy, good vibes, and I'm super pumped you took the time to hang out here a little bit. What's always good to do is to sort of frame the conversation. Maybe you could talk about where you grew up. I know you started really young in the business, but, kind of where you grew up, your upbringing, and then maybe your first foray into the business and, how you first got started would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I grew up in Muncie, New York, little enclave of an ultra-Orthodox community with great, fantastic parents who were super supportive. We are four brothers. I always joke around. My dad's a Moyle. He does ritual circumcision. He didn't know anything about daughters. So we're four boys, rambunctious boys. And my brothers and I all played, I should say two of my brothers and I played music professionally growing up. It was a really wholesome upbringing. We're all very close family. And growing up, I just didn't like boredom. I didn't particularly like some of the studies I was working on in elementary school. And so I'm 10 years old. I say to my dad, hey, can I borrow your lawnmower? And that's where my entrepreneurship, I guess, essentially started outside of selling my grandfather's presents to other friends and family. And so I started out in cutting people's grass, and I made, I think, $600 or $700 when I was 10 years old, then reinvested that into additional equipment. My parents gave me a loan. And by the time I was 15, we had 100 accounts. I wasn't dressed in the suit and tie, but rather covered in grass from head to toe. You come back from school blowing leaves late at night with big halogen lights lighting up the yard. And my dad would come out and help us fix equipment. My mom is your 4'11", shy Jewish woman, amazing mom, driving around a bunch of teenagers with trailers filled with equipment. Yeah, massive barrel garbage cans on top of the car. I mean, it's when I think about it today, it was wild. But I really learned what it meant to work hard and to be honest and to manage a team of people.
Amazing. And I guess that was a really good foundation for construction. A lot of people you meet, they buy and sell real estate, they finance, they JV, they lease, but you don't meet very many really up from the ground development. You've really rolled up your sleeves. And I think from a young age, you've showed that you like to roll up your sleeves, literally and figuratively. Then let's talk about maybe your first project or two, your education, and then how you got started on the first deal.
Just putting it all out there. I was in high school through 11th grade. Wasn't going that great. Was doing super well on the studying. I just wasn't stimulated back then. And I wasn't learning what I really wanted to learn. I wasn't learning anything about finance. I wasn't really learning about current events of the world. But I was working, and I was working hard. I mean, I get myself thrown out of school so that I can catch up on my landscaping together with my employees. And their parents weren't all that happy. So it was quite interesting times, as you can imagine. But I was always working night times and weekends and summers. And I had decided, I made the decision after 11th grade to go off to Israel. Had a lot of family and friends there. And like I mentioned earlier on, my brothers and I were playing music professionally. And I figured, you know what, I'll go for a couple of months. I kind of missed my 12th grade, my senior year, but I'm going to look for a new experience. And my mom was running the landscaping business at the time. I ended up going to Israel, come back in the summer, take my GEDs, make sure I get my high school diploma. And I fell in love. And I said, hey, I got my whole life to work. And I've practically worked my whole life. So I'm going to stay in Israel for a period of time. And I went, learned in a yeshiva, Talmudic studies, and was playing music around the country professionally. And what would happen is I'd come back to the States twice a year. And at times, my mom would hire college professors, and I'd start learning finance. They were on break, on vacation from teaching, and I was back from Israel. So I got my real estate degree. We learned finance. I'm dating myself to some extent. I'm not that old, but I mean, there wasn't Google. I didn't have real estate translation. So I sat with this little dictionary. And I remember the first time I'm hearing the word amortization. I'm like, how do you spell that? I have no idea what I'm talking about. But the understanding for me was trying to get into the investment and creativity and creation of real estate. It was a driver of mine since I was young. And I kind of was exposed to it when I was a little bit younger. I invested $10,000 through a friend of my mom. They had a large multifamily platform at the time. I didn't really understand what they were doing, but I made 10% on the money. And I said, hey, I come from a family, grandparents, uncle, all in the law field, all attorneys at big firms. And I said, that's not for me. I got to sit in one place for too long. Little did I know that I spend the majority of my day with my lovely attorney friends. And so I go to Israel. I end up staying for 4 years in total. I come back. I'm 21 years old. My uncle at the time was an associate at Simpson Thatcher. And he and I partnered, and we bought our first house in Brooklyn. And at the time, it was Marine Park on 35th Street. Growing up in Rockland County, we grew up with a yard and large space. I couldn't understand. I'm like, hey, this is a little box. There's no yard, 3 bedrooms. Who's going to live here? But kept the property for 16 months, and we doubled our equity investment at the time. And that gave me a taste. I remember attending my first closing where the residential attorney at the time was representing both the lender and myself. And it was a very interesting learning experience. But from there, I had opportunities to renovate some other homes for individuals or friends of our family on a fee basis. And I really loved the creativity of doing something like that. Aaron, as you mentioned, it wasn't just about the numbers. It was also about constructing or building something that I thought could add value. And from there, I started buying property in New Jersey, smaller multifamilies, then landed in a historic district. Had no idea what that even meant. Again, I'm my young 20s at the time. It really taught me about tax credits, historic tax credits, restorations, and so on and so forth. We went from there to boutique office buildings, I'd say between 20 and 40,000 square feet. And in 2006, I had purchased my first office building in Connecticut. And that was a property. I said, hey, look at the underwriting at 50% occupancy at $12 a square foot gross. I'm paying all my bills. I just sold that building a few weeks ago. It was just about 16 years later. And a lot of people asked me, hey, how did that make any economic sense? And it was a historic tax credit project that we converted at a later point in 2019. And so I'm all about opportunity, and opportunities rolled in on the built to suit, where a lot of medical dentists and doctors would come. They try to lease space from us, and then have to go through the architectural engineering, design, permitting process. And it's not what they do. They're busy practicing medicine. And so I kind of fell into the built to suit platform where they'd sign a long-term lease, hence building a lot of value prior. And we perform all the construction and hand over a turnkey space. But it was not from the perspective of a large-scale Starbucks corporate. We used the same model, though, for the ma and pa medical industry. That led us to do T-Mobile, gas stations, Hartford Healthcare Surgery Centers, AFC Urgent Care Centers, which were 23 different states. We had focused on the New England market per se. And over time, we also worked on multiple smaller, I say smaller, 20 to 40,000 square foot historic conversions. And that had given me the taste of the public-private partnership where these deals did not pencil, yet they offered tremendous upside for the communities they were in, and many times a more distressed municipality with beautiful historic buildings that were sitting underutilized for many years. And I got the taste of the public-private partnership. From there, over the past 5 years, really rolled into the larger scale multifamily, which unleashes my creativity, brings a couple of white hairs, and and so on and so forth. And so we've built over the past couple of years about 400 plus units and a mixed use component in multiple different projects, typically focus on 100 units plus. And we're going in the ground, God willing, this year on 542 units, predominantly in the New England, Connecticut marketplace.
You've also built a great team, of many of which who I've had the pleasure of meeting and hanging out with at some dinners, etc. You really are vertically integrated. A lot of developers are outsourcing, but you really have a full team that's doing everything A to Z. Maybe you could talk about, how you scale your operational capability alongside projects, because at certain times, and we feel it too, we're a business, maybe overstaffed, understaffed, finding the right people for the right project, the right opportunity. You're always growing. So how do you manage to juggle between, managing kind of at a high level, almost politically? You're interfacing with a lot of political figures, public-private partnerships. You're keeping relations with your investors. You got to have a lot of broker relationships. I know you're on the phone with lawyers a lot, maybe more than you'd like, in a good way, making deals. And you're also running a team. How do you maintain that juggling? I know you work extremely hard, but how do you set yourself up daily to succeed while you have all these different balls in the air?
Great question. I'll add to that: a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 1-year-old.
Oh yeah. Oh, we didn't even get there. I didn't even go in there exactly. Yeah.
Talking about balance, though, and being present as a dad. We'll talk about that in a moment. It's a great question. What I don't want to do is only focus on the positivity. I also want to focus on the challenges because I feel that many times people get up, we attend these, breakfasts, happy hours, and everyone's spouting how fantastic and it's amazing. And it's just, look, we've grown and it's just easy. And from the outside, it looks like this tremendous success. It's challenging. And I think the big focus is good people, right? So you cannot grow without delegating. And so I'll talk about my organization and a couple of key individuals and how I've managed to grow and my focus on growth, and also on myself and my family, because that's a big component that ties together, right? You can just work and work and work, but at some point, what's it all for? Another part of this conversation, hopefully. So our chief operating officer, Uriel Schatz, I've known him since my Israel days. When he didn't speak a word of English, he had come in from Mexico, and we met in the old city of Jerusalem. And he used to nod, hey, like understood what I was talking about. And a little did I know that he wasn't fluent in English at the time. He ends up going to Yeshiva University. He ends up with graduating with a finance degree, and just fast forward, worked for very large multi-billion-dollar family offices. He's our chief operating officer. He's a guy I could trust with my life, and so he can run a part of my organization. I don't have to be on every email, on every conversation, on every follow-up, finance, and so on and so forth. And it's also hiring individuals, and it's part of the team that may be way better at specific aspects than I am, right? You have to humble yourself and say, look, I'm good at X, but there's a lot of other people that are good at Y. Our head of construction has been with me for 19 years now, I'd say. I grew up with him since
Wow.
pre-1A. He and I worked in the landscaping together, right? And so he's a licensed chief building inspector. Another individual works on property management for us and special projects, been with me for 8 years. I can call him day or night. There's an issue, he's going to make sure it happens. And I keeps on going. We're a team of about 25 people, and getting it right sometimes is difficult. We may have some hires a couple of times that don't fit the team. And so one of the difficulties is knowing when to let someone go, right? If they don't fit the culture or the work ethic, or you can't trust that individual, then they're not the right person for our team. So that's really helped on the growth. The challenge, Aaron, like you mentioned, is, hey, you're growing, there's payroll, there's infrastructure, and you always, on the development side, need to make sure that you have a pipeline. The pipeline starts years before there's a shovel in the ground. Now, in this particular environment, it's even more difficult because you may have thought you're going to finance from one specific direction. Well, the lenders were closed to lending at a period of time. There was COVID. There's hyperinflation. Navigating that, there's no map. There's no particular way to say, hey, here's how you're going to navigate this. Entrepreneurial spirit is huge. Like I mentioned before, having great people you can trust and delegate to is essential. And praying to God, that's all I can say. It's like, hey, praying every day and then hoping for the best. I heard something really interesting the other day. It was, an individual was going through difficult times at a point in time on the large scale development side of things. And when you look at the mountain, you say, wow, how am I going to get past this? It's insurmountable. But if you do something positive every day, the compounding effect of that is tremendous. And I took that lesson internally. Part of scaling and growing a business is, hey, all of a sudden you need HR. What did 10 years ago, HR for what, right? It was myself and 3 or 4 other people. And that was it. It was our good buddies and we were working together. And growing in areas that I never imagined were also challenges, but I do love to learn. So if you combine an entrepreneurial spirit, a creativity, and thirst for learning, goes back to my conversation prior about leaving high school after 11th grade, where I always wanted to learn. It just, the mold didn't work for me at that particular time. And at no point do I say for anybody to do what I did. It takes a very particular individual, but scaling and growth in challenging times will also make you stronger when times are super fruitful and things get a little bit easier. The lending markets open up. Construction costs come down to some extent. And so those would be the key takeaways.
And you're also one of the most positive people on planet Earth too. Like, I've been around a lot of people. Your energy is through the roof. So no matter what's going on, it could be raining fire, and lightning and hail, and you'll just find a way to have a positive outlook. And I think that's also a huge driver of how you've attracted a lot of like-minded people to your orbit. And speaking of attracting, maybe we could talk a little bit about the public-private partnerships. It's kind of a niche space. You hear a lot of people talk about it, but not many people do it exceptionally well. You've been doing it a long time. I know the relationships you have in certain municipalities in Connecticut go back at this point many, many years. And through the fruitful relationships there, you can make deals pencil. And perhaps today somebody's trying to do certain development deals and they're trying to think about getting deal flow and they've never really explored this path. Maybe you could talk on a macro level how you've seen success with the public-private partnerships.
Oh, absolutely. My grandma always used to tell me, she's like, when you negotiate, make sure to leave something on the table. It's the opposite takeaway for some other individuals. Don't wipe the table clean. I've taken that motto with me, where you don't have to milk every last dollar, squeeze every last penny, where one side has to walk away feeling bad or taken advantage of. And that's really the segue into the public-private partnership. It's a partnership, and people don't understand what that means. Essentially, there's a municipality that is going to benefit from your development. Now, not every municipality can foresee the benefit, and not every city council member or every mayor's office or every state will see the benefit. And then there's a benefit for us as a developer, where essentially the municipality and or the state are going to contribute towards your project. So the challenge is making sure that it's a win-win and being able to portray to a municipality why they want you, specifically you, not just a development. An RFP goes out, people could say, we're going to build, X amount of units or retail, but why do they want Jasko Development or Avner Krohn to be a part of their municipality? And so what I try to do is think about it from their perspective and say, what are we looking for? We're typically on a public-private partnership looking for them to contribute. What can a town contribute? What can the state contribute? Well, they could contribute a long-term pilot program. Connecticut doesn't really have pilot programs. We call it a tax fix. Now, I made it up one day. I'm like, I got to look at the state statutes. If it's allowed, something that a local municipality could contribute is long-term tax deals. You have to be able to show the municipality, like, hey, you're going to make 2, 3, maybe 500% more tax revenue with this tax deal, in addition to having very significant development in your core town. So it's a win. Not, oh, hey, you're going to give this developer a whole ton of millions of dollars of tax breaks. They're just the rich developer who's going to benefit, right? So that's the conversation we have on a regular basis. developer equals rich equals being taken advantage of the city. And so the conversation is granular and it's very long-term relationships. It's not like you can storm your way to a municipality one day and say, hey, guys, we're here. You want us to work here? This is what you're going to have to give us. It's reputation. And then it's technical know-how because there are a lot of regulation placed on local municipalities, federal government related to state funding related to grants, and the hair that may come along with the public-private participation. So, for example, a lot of people don't realize that a tax deal may not be transferable. Well, how does your lender look at it? Because if they ever took a property back, they've just lost the tax deal. It's a no-go. And so there's many different factors. We just turned down a $4 million grant awarded by the state of Connecticut because unbeknownst to the state agency, the Department of Labor through the state put a ruling out that the entirety of the project would have to go prevailing wage, not just the $4 million grant. That particular project was about a $27 million project. The costs together with affordability component were about $6.5 million. So if you take $4 million grant, you just have a $6.5 million cost. But essentially, it's weighing in to the public as well. Hey, we desperately need housing of all kinds. We need affordable. We need workforce. We need market rate to free up some of the affordable units for other individuals. How do we accomplish that? And so I try to be a part of that conversation as much as possible and thinking out of the box. In today's environment, if you give me a free piece of land in most towns in Connecticut, excluding super affluent towns, I cannot build a yield to cost that will actually make any sense for ourselves, our investors, or our lenders. And so the only way to actually succeed in most municipalities today, look at some of the projects Kushner's have been putting on in New Jersey, is the public participation. And again, when you're taking someone who may sit on city council and they may be a doctor, maybe they're working in a completely different field, how do you explain debt service coverage ratios, right? How do you explain expectations for returns? How do you explain the benefit? And it gets very granular. And part of that is really reputation. And it goes into our design process. When we're building in a moderate to lower income town, we're building nicer than in an affluent town at times. And that's because we want to attract people to live here and the local municipalities participating. And so we want to give something back. We may be able to get away with a 3-story building, but instead we're going to build something a 6-story. It's going to add density and foot traffic to the core downtown. So it's pulling yourself as the developer out of the equation and thinking about it from the municipality side, and then being able to insert yourself back in and say, okay, here's how this all works. And it's many, many years of participation on the political side as well.
Well said, Avner. You're really encapsulating that beautifully. And long and short of it is having that integrity too. When you come to a town, a lot of times there's this fear of who is this developer? What are their morals? How do they deal with people? Not just the granular X's and O's, but will they be a tried and true partner that we can trust? Can we sleep at night knowing we've given this person reign, frankly, to develop where we live, where we work, where we play, where we raise our kids? And you've really built that reputation over the years, which is fabulous. So one more question I have for you while we're talking on this is that, we call this podcast The Dealmaker's Edge, right? And there's a lot of mental aspects to the business, right? You've described you're juggling projects, you're juggling a growing young family, juggling a lot of team members, a lot of political relationships. You have good days, you have bad days, you have in between days. You're an extremely positive person, of the most positive people I know, by the way. How do you talk to yourself when you're having those rocky times? A lender pulls a deal, an investor backs out, interest rates were double what were forecasted. How do you sort of talk to yourself to power through some of those challenging times?
It's a great question. It's a deep question. I take a deep breath. I got a great wife, thank God. I could talk through some of these challenges. I feel like it's been a storm over the past couple of years because, Aaron, like you mentioned, in any of our businesses, a pandemic, a 40% increase in construction costs, a doubling of interest rates. It's like you think you got through one thing and what's coming next. But I am internally optimistic and I am a problem solver. And I think if you own a business and if you're a developer, it's all about problem solving. And so it smacks me in the face. It hurts. I don't have an answer. How are we going to get through this challenge at this particular time? But I don't give up. And so I also look at our investors' funds as more important than mine, which is a huge factor because you need to make sure that, hey, when there's a challenge, how are you going to protect all people's livelihoods that are invested with us as well? So I try to exercise, which is one that helps a lot, by the way. If I have a bad day, I'll just hit the gym a little bit harder that day. But it's really looking at it and saying, okay, here's the reality, here's the challenge. But to every challenge, there's some sort of workaround. It may not be how we thought. It may be a completely different aspect. We may not make as much as we wanted to make. There's going to be uncomfortable conversations with a lender or uncomfortable conversations with a third-party contractor and so on and so forth. But it's trying to figure out the macro. And like I said a little bit earlier on, it's looking at how do I accomplish something positive every day towards solving the issue. So, for example, when there was hyperinflation, did we see the writing on the wall immediately in Connecticut that there'd be this hyper rental increase? We didn't know that right away. And then all of a sudden, a state that had stagnant rents, maybe a growth of 2 or 3% for decades, had a massive increase in the rental income. And so while it didn't solve for all issues, it solved for construction overruns. Now, hindsight's 2020. We didn't know all about that early on. And so it's navigating the conversations that have to happen prior. But for myself, there are down days, there are difficult days, there are difficult moments, there's difficult weeks because there's not always an answer as to how we're going to get past any one particular challenge. But I like to underscore it's a challenge. And the goal is just thinking past it and getting super creative. And one of the things I remind myself all the time is with challenging times, there will be an uptick in the marketplace, right? If you look back and you say, hey, 17 years ago, did you think you're going to have interest rates at 2% and cap rates in tertiary markets at 4%? People would have thought you're nuts. But that happened at a period of time. So it's riding the waves that gets me past it. And again, it's also leaning on my team because what really is challenging, but really is the view of your organization is getting through the challenging times and being able to lean on your teammates and our staff. And it's not just all on my shoulders. And when you know that you have other people that are going to work tirelessly to overcome obstacles, that goes a long way. And then, Aaron, you know this about me. I always want to have a good time. I have to have a good time. My friends, my team has to have a fantastic time. And if there's a bad day, then I want to make that night an even better night because there's one life. And so that's the other part of it. Let's have a great, cocktail. Let's go out and have a bunch of friends out. Let's have dinner. Whatever it's going to be, and we're also blessed. I keep Shabbat. And so for me, Friday night, right, I'm out, man. I'm checked out till an hour after sundown on Saturday night. And that's time to rejuvenate as well with the family and just to rethink life and say, okay, it's going to be okay. And the other major aspect, I don't want to forget to leave this out because it's the most important aspect. I believe in God, right? And it's, as much as I like to think that I'm in control, we all like to think, hey, yeah, I'm going to do this mega project and I'm going to work through this challenge. I'm a pawn. I do my best to take a step forward, but ultimately, I'm a big believer that God runs the world, which helps set me up to not worry as much. And I'm telling that to myself over and over as we speak right now.
Well said. And I do agree. You always want to have a good time, and people want to be around people who are positive. There's a lot of people who just have this sort of down and out mentality. They're hot when the market's hot and down when the market's down. But I've never spent time with you where you have not had a smile on your face and a positive energy and a good laugh. And we've had great times together as well. Always fun to hang out. Yeah. One more question I have for you, and feel free to throw in anything else that I have not asked you. You've seen so many changes in the market in the last 6, 12, 18, 24 months as described. No one has a crystal ball, but in real time, you're buying materials for construction. You're talking to municipalities. You're collecting rent. You have a lot of fingers on the pulse that maybe other people who are not developing may have. And maybe you could describe where you're feeling the market is today versus even just 6, 12 months ago. There's a lot of moving pieces now. And maybe you can talk about whether you're more optimistic, less optimistic, what kind of trends you may be feeling projecting out a bunch of months.
I'm going to look at a little bit more hyper focused on New England, Connecticut, and then how I view that particular market, because there are many other high growth markets that, while I read what everybody else is reading, I don't have my finger on the pulse in those particular markets. And those markets had like super high growth over the past number of years, tremendous amount of construction. The absorption rate's different. I'm in a state where there's a high barrier to entry for construction. Most of the projects are between 100 and 200 units. You're not really dealing with mega projects and high rise outside of certain specific cities. And so, yes, there have been many, many, many challenges. I think the interest rate coming down conversation clearly has been, we're now a couple of years out for like, hey, 2024 is going to be so much better and 2025 is going to get great. There's an election and everything's going to be all rosy. And then we have the tariff conversations and the 10-year or the 5 years going up and down every single day. I think that particularly in New England, we are seeing construction costs stabilize. We are seeing subcontractors who are now not as busy for some particular trades. And we're also seeing an influx of some trades from out of state. So for example, New York City, right? Or even in some of the high growth marketplaces where construction has slowed down. And so there are tradesmen who are either relocating or coming in to work within the New England region. That's a benefit. We have seen some of the local lenders open up additional lending for projects to experienced developers in particular markets. And I'll give a case scenario which got approved last week on a small loan. It's a $10+ million loan on a second phase of a very successful project. We're borrowing at 80% loan to cost at a 7% interest rate, fixed for 5 years. Super local lender. They've seen our success. And so they're open to getting aggressive so long as your debt service coverage ratio meets the requirements. And it's below 1.25, by the way. And so I think that moving to the future, there are a lot of projects that are falling off the grid that don't make some financial sense. I do believe that a lot of municipalities in New England are more open to a public-private partnership. We just passed legislation in the last legislative period in the state of Connecticut, which now allows every municipality to enter into up to a 30-year tax deal, where prior it was capped at 10 years for many municipalities. So I think that we will hopefully see this is an unknown to me. I'm not an economist, and I wish I had a better outlook, but I don't think that the interest rate is plummeting. If it does, we end up with another set of concerns, which is unemployment potentially in particular markets. I'll give you an example. ESPN has been hiring in Bristol, Connecticut, random town no one would ever imagine, but we're seeing dozens of tenants signing leases in our particular markets. If they have layoffs, it's a direct hit to the local economy. And so it's like, you better pray for what you wish for from some perspective. Rates come down, does help to some extent, but where does the economy? Another big question. There's some balance with all of the perfect balance. I don't know where that is. Construction costs are where they are. You're not going to see a deflation, right? You may see some kind of balance, but I don't think your HVAC unit that used to cost $11,000 a unit in 2019, that went up to $22,000 a unit, it's not coming down to $14,000 a unit. Your balance might be $17,000 or $18,000 a unit. And so rent is going to have to stay at the levels they are right now and increase. There is a lot less housing availabilities on the single family home market in the New England market. There's not a lot of land. And so I believe the delta between rental and purchasing a home is larger than it's ever been with the current interest rates. Home builders have difficulty building something ground up when you're not building a large scale project, which is very, very difficult in the state of Connecticut. And so I do think the rental market in New England is going to stay very strong. I think that rents are going to increase, as they have significantly. I think that the lending market locally, if you are hyper local and involved, is going to open up even more so than it has right now. That's my predictions moving forward in the next 6 months.
Well, we'll play the tape in 6 months and see what happens. But all kidding aside, no matter what happens, I'm confident you'll be ready to face the challenge. You'll be in a good mood that day, no matter what's going on. And you'll be a great dad, great husband, great friend, all the other good things that are so critical. But Avner, I guess From here, we'll wrap. I just want to really thank you for taking the time. It's always a pleasure, whether it's over this Zoom recording or in person. And keep doing everything you're doing at a very high level. It's so much fun to watch. And just excited to continue to see your continued growth as a professional and as a human being. Thank you for joining the Dealmaker's Edge. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. And please give us a 5-star rating so more people can follow the conversation.